Hello, I'm Connor McHugh, and I'm going to be talking to you about the trial of Colin Ferguson after he was arrested in 1993 for shooting up a train car on the Long Island Railroad in New York. So, this started on December 7th, 1993. Ferguson boarded a train car and he sat in the back row. He then began to open fire on both of the people sitting next to him. After he did that, he continued to work his way up the train car, shooting people in each row until he had to reload at one point, and he was tackled to the floor by a few of the people on the train. Upon being tackled, they held him there until police ended up showing up. By the time he had to reload, he was tackled to the floor. Ferguson was able to kill 6 passengers and wound another 19 passengers. He claimed that he was not the person who opened up fire upon arrest, but when police searched him, they searched his pockets and they found torn up pieces of paper, which all had the labels, reasons to do this. Basically, all the reasons that he had on the pieces of paper were all related to race and racism. And he stated how he wanted to kill all the white people and like all the Uncle Tom's people, like he said. Ferguson was arrested the year before for assaulting a woman, but it didn't really go into too much detail about it. He really just kind of like was the wrong person, and he feels like he was just racially, he was arrested because of his race. So before the trial started, Ferguson's attorneys tried claiming that he was mentally unfit to stand trial. He was interviewed by multiple psychiatrists. This is more just going into detail. There's a few pictures of him on trial. So his attorneys tried saying that he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but he completely disagreed with this. He didn't agree with his attorneys. So this is the criminal defense theory I'm bringing up, the criminal insanity defense. His lawyers pleaded for it. So what ended up happening was Ferguson was interviewed by a few psychiatrists. The ones appointed by the court all found that he was fit to stand trial and he understands what he did and the severity of the charges. But there was another psychiatrist who was hired by the defense attorneys who believed that he had a personality disorder and he was completely unfit to stand trial and he was mentally insane. What ended up happening was Ferguson lost trust in his attorneys because they ended up starting to say private conversations they had with him to the press. So he ended up filing to drop his lawyers and represent himself. The judge ended up agreeing with Ferguson that he's able to stand trial after interviewing himself. And he also believed that he was fit to represent himself in the trial, even though his own lawyers were fighting against this, claiming that since he's saying that he's wants to represent himself, that should be enough proof that he's criminally insane. So, once the trial began, Ferguson continued to claim that he was not the person who shot up the train. So what ended up happening with him representing himself, it had both positive and negative effects on the jury. The pro that it had was that Ferguson was able to give his firsthand description of the events which took place, and he didn't have to get cross-examined because he would do this in his opening and closing statements. Throughout the entire trial, too, Ferguson played it smart by never talking in the first person. He never said, like, I or me when talking about the events. He would always continue to say Mr. Ferguson when referring to himself. The only downfall this had was that whenever he would cross-examine a witness, they would always refer to him as you or like I saw you do it. They would point at him out. Even one woman was quoted. She said, yes, I didn't want you to shoot me again. I saw you shoot me the first time and played dead. So the fact that witnesses were addressing Ferguson as you while describing him, it hurt his chances with the jury because it made them feel more compelled that he was the one who was committing it because they were pointing him straight out. But throughout the entire trial, criminal justice and law professionals stated how well of a job that Ferguson actually did representing himself. He posed very well stated questions to the potential jurors while selecting them. Basically like asking them like their opinions on like African Americans, because he believed that this was like a racially motivated trial. And even seasoned lawyers said that they would have asked the same exact questions when they were talking about it. In the end of the trial, he was ultimately found guilty, and he was sentenced to 315 years in prison because for the murder of the 6 individuals who were killed, and then attempted murder for the other 19 who were injured. All in all, I believe the criminal justice system did an excellent job throughout the entire case. The man clearly wanted to defend himself, and in my opinion, he was not mentally insane, and he really did know what he was doing. If he ended up making a fool of himself and proved that he was insane while representing himself, then I could hold the criminal justice system accountable, but he did a pretty decent job representing himself. Even professionals stated that his closing argument even outperformed that of the prosecution. In the end, there was really no way Colin Ferguson ever had a chance of getting off on the charges. He really was pinned as the person who did it from the start. There was no question in anyone's mind if he was the person who shot up the train. So he really didn't hurt his chances by representing himself. If anything, I personally feel like he did help himself representing himself. There was really no escaping the fact that he did it, so any defense attorney would have failed and not gotten him off. In the future, I believe that anyone who is deemed fit to stand trial should have the option to represent themselves in a court of law. This is what the precedent is today, because any person who is fit to stand trial should be able to realize, in more cases than not, it's going to be more detrimental for them to represent themselves instead of a lawyer, because lawyers are trained professionals and they know what they're doing. So, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Good night.